All right, today we're going to explore what might be one of the most powerful metaphors for the human mind ever. It comes from James Allen's classic work, As a Man Thinketh, and it's this really simple but profound idea of the mind as a garden.
But before we get into all that, let me ask you a question. What's actually growing in your mind right now? Seriously, because here's the thing. Whether we pay attention to it or not, our mind is always producing something. It's never just empty. So the real question becomes, are you intentionally planting flowers, or are you just kind of letting the weeds take over by default?
So, in this explainer, we're going to walk through 5 key ideas. First, we'll cover the basic concept, the garden of your mind. Then, we'll get into how that garden actually grows. After that, we'll talk about how to tend your inner garden, a practical method. We'll also look at some real-world examples, and we'll finish up with a super simple reset that you can try out today.
Okay, let's dive into section 1, the garden of your mind. This is really the foundation for everything else we're going to talk about. The big idea here is that your mind isn't just some passive space where thoughts just happen to you. Nope, it's an active, fertile piece of ground.
So to put it really simply, your mind is a living ecosystem. It's always active, always growing something, and what it ends up producing is a direct result of what you've planted in it, whether you did that on purpose or just by letting things slide.
And this really gets to the heart of what James Allen was saying. He pointed out that the mind is never just dormant or fallow. It will produce something no matter what. So if we don't make a conscious choice to plant useful seeds, good thoughts, then useless weed seeds are going to find their way in and just take over.
Okay, so that leads us right into section 2. Let's look at how this all builds up. How exactly does the garden grow? This is where we get into the nuts and bolts of how thoughts become, well, our actual reality.
You see, our thoughts aren't just these fleeting private things that just disappear. No, they're the actual seeds of our circumstances. Every single action we take, every outcome we experience, it all starts as a tiny little seed of a thought, right there in the garden of our mind.
And this really shows the 2 paths you can go down, right? A mind that's intentionally cared for, that leads to things like clarity, a sense of purpose, peace. But a mind that's just left to chance or neglected, well, that's where you get confusion, distress, and weakness. The difference is just night and day.
Now, this might be the single most important point in all of Allen's work. Ready? Neglect is not neutral. It's an action. Failing to plant good thoughts is, in itself, an active choice. It creates the perfect soil for all those useless, negative thoughts, the weeds, to just pop up and completely take over the whole garden.
And here's how that process works. It all starts with just a single thought, an idea that takes root. Now, if you keep watering that thought by thinking it over and over, it starts to crystallize into a habit. And then, over time, that habit solidifies into the actual tangible circumstances of your life. See? It's a really clear cause and effect chain.
Which brings us perfectly to section 3. Okay, so if we're the gardeners of our own minds, how do we actually do the gardening? Let's talk about a practical, no-nonsense way to tend to that inner world of ours.
Really, it all boils down to 3 simple steps. Step 1 is weeding. This is all about learning to notice and maybe just gently question those automatic, unhelpful thoughts that pop up. Step 2 is planting. This is where you intentionally choose what you want to focus on, planting the seeds of purpose and clarity. And finally, step 3, watering. This is how you reinforce those good thoughts with small, consistent actions out in the real world.
All right, let's make this even more concrete, shall we? Section 4 is all about taking this thought garden idea and applying it to the kinds of everyday situations we all run into.
So check out this breakdown of how it works in practice. At work, a weed thought might be something like, I can't handle this, which just leads to feeling overwhelmed, right? But if you shift to a flower thought like, okay, I can figure this out, that cultivates courage. And you can see the exact same pattern in our relationships and with our habits. In every single case, that initial seed of a thought is what determines the kind of fruit you get.
And ultimately, what this all points to is this. Our character isn't some fixed thing we're just born with. It's actually the complete sum of all the thoughts we've chosen to grow and nurture over time. You could say our character is the final harvest from our mental garden.
Okay, on to our final section. I want to give you a simple, practical reset. This is something you can literally do the second this explainer is over to start putting this all into practice.
We're calling it the garden reset. And it's just what it sounds like. A brief, mindful pause. Now, the goal here isn't to judge whatever you find growing in your mind. Not at all. It's just to observe it. Because that awareness, that's what gives you the power to consciously choose what you're going to cultivate next.
And here's how simple it is to do. First, just pause for 1 full minute. Then, just gently name one recurring weed you've noticed, a negative thought that keeps popping up. Next, name one flower, a thought you'd actually like to grow instead. Then take one slow, deep breath. And that's it. Return to your day. It's like a tiny little micro-practice in mental gardening.
And just remember, transforming your inner garden, it's not about some grand, heroic effort. It's really about the small, daily acts of cultivation. It's consistency, not intensity, that builds real mental strength over the long haul.
So as we wrap up, I'll leave you with this one question to think about. What is one single seed, one useful, purposeful thought that you're going to consciously choose to plant in your garden today? Always remember James Allen's core message here. You are the master gardener of your own mind, of your soul. The thoughts you choose to cultivate today really will create your reality tomorrow. If you found this useful, make sure you watch our next explainer. And hey, check out the full playlist on our channel for even more.